Greetings to each and every one of you in the St. Thomas Parish family. My name is Tricia Lyons, and I live and teach at Virginia Theological Seminary. My dear friend and a great leader in your community, Emily Given, reached out to me and asked me to record a message of encouragement and hope in these troubled pandemic times. I still feel grateful for the time I was able to spend in your community last year, visiting and preaching and giving an adult forum on C.S. Lewis for your year of C.S. Lewis. I remember your parish in my prayers, and I remember the intergenerational, faithful, contagious faith community that you are. The music, the outreach ministries, the children's ministries, ministries to almost every kind of person. You are a brave and an indomitable spirit. I could feel it. And I get to see a lot of churches. So it's an honor to even be asked to add something to the momentum of hope in a time where it feels like that momentum has to really go uphill. Of all the things I could share with you for encouragement, why don't we use C.S. Lewis? Since this is not the first time I've spoken with your parish about him. If you haven't read the sermon, Learning in Wartime, that C.S. Lewis gave in 1939, it was the fall at Oxford. And World War II was a reality in England in ways it wasn't yet in the United States. And people were going off to war, and people were being injured. And C.S. Lewis had this really difficult job of being the opening preacher for a semester of studying things like archaeology or Greek myth or Shakespeare. And he decides to use that sermon to defend doing something like learning high arts in a time of war, where you could literally know someone on every block who was either off fighting or home grieving. It's an interesting sermon to read. It's a little dated in some ways, so if you can pull it off the internet, it's a PDF, it's free, you can read it right now if you just Google it. And it begins with C.S. Lewis saying something that is on perhaps your mind right now, which is when there's something happening, something terrifying, something that is killing people all over the world. When something like that is happening, how do you concentrate on something like reading poetry or renting a movie on Netflix, like, binge watching one of your favorite shows? How do you justify the kinds of things that can feel like distractions or something playful when something so horrible is going on? So in 1939, that fall, he preaches this sermon to try to help people get focused on being students at a time when bombs will not soon off be falling from the sky at night over London. But here's what C.S. Lewis says. The truth, he says, is that war doesn't create a new situation. It just might create a new emotional situation for you. There are people, he says, who are suffering all over the world at every moment in something that feels like a complete calamity, something that's threatening their life, not just their joy, but their actual physical life. But often what happens in war is people who don't usually feel that way, who are privileged enough to not really feel like their life could be taken from them. Those are the people who really freak out when something happens like this. So the first thing he says is, what is really different today than any other day? Perhaps just your feeling that your life is in some kind of danger. So we have solidarity now. Those of us who are terrified in ways this week that we weren't last week or last month, we now share the terror that people feel all over the world at any given moment. C.S. Lewis also says something that's very important if you're an Episcopalian. Very important in the Anglican tradition, that we believe God has designed us for learning. And no matter what is going on, even if we're just trying to learn how to survive, how to get toilet paper, that no matter what is happening, the human spirit is ready and is fed by learning. So what C.S. Lewis says, and it's one of the most famous lines in this sermon, is this. He said, the reason to read good books now is because if you don't read good books, you'll read bad ones. He points out that this desire for learning doesn't go away even if you're afraid. So feed yourself wherever you are with the things around you, whether it's art or music or just spending time with a pet or looking out on the street when people walk by in ways they maybe haven't with a dog or with their children, and wave. Lewis says, don't be afraid to learn in times of terror, because the truth is, times can always be terrifying. and you are wired to learn. So don't feel guilty about taking pleasure in things like the Sistine Chapel or your favorite kind of music, or even just spending quality time with someone. Don't say, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be doing something connected to the calamity. Remember, we're connected to God. So don't feel ashamed of learning something that may have nothing to do with survival. And lastly, and here's C.S. Lewis's really, really good news. He says everything that we do can be something we do with God. Look at Jesus, who in the middle of playing out the story of redemption and salvation for all the world, for all time, goes to a wedding. And when he gets there, he doesn't deliver this fiery sermon warning everyone that there's going to be a choice between the Messiah and other things and other kingdoms. He actually gives the gift of wine, reminding us that whatever you do, if you do it thinking and talking with God, that act becomes part of your language with God, which will continue even through and beyond death. There is no question, I know I feel it myself, that this current moment of pandemic is making me anxious all the time. I feel like I'm always doing something and yet I'm not getting anything done. Maybe you know something about that. But I think of what C.S. Lewis said, and I realize that what I'm really afraid of is death. And what falls apart in pandemics or in war is any kind of silly confidence we had that we had control over our lives, even our own health. This is just a reminder, frankly, of what's true all the time, that it is God who is our foundation, the rock on which we stand. So my friends, that's my encouragement to you. Keep saying your prayers, even if you feel afraid. Keep talking to God and keep planting your herbs because it's spring, or knitting because that's what you do, or playing virtual reality, or going for a walk. Whatever it is that you do it with God, because that relationship through baptism will go with you forever. Jesus did say, in this life you will have trouble, but take heart. God says, I have defeated death and all the forces and principalities against you. My friends, we are in God's embrace. Don't let fear take over, though there's not much we can do right now about pushing it entirely away. So do every little thing you do today and tomorrow with God. And remember that Jesus said, I will be with you even to the end of the age.